3D texture editing. 3D texture editing. So what about 3D texture editing? By the way, you can use the Photoshop painting and adjustment tools to edit the texture content in a 3D file. Or to create new textures. And textures are imported, by the way, as 2D files with the 3D model. And they appear as entiles in the layers panel and nested under the 3D layer, by the way, and grouped by map type and diffuse and bump and glossiness and so on. And by the way, to view a thumbnail of a particular texture file, hover the mouse pointer over the name of the texture in the layers panel. The image, by the way, the image size and color mode are also displayed, like the next image and next screenshot now. This image, by the way, explain for you layers panel showing 3D texture and grouped by texture map type, and AS meaning 3D layer, and BS meaning texture map types, and CS meaning texture map file name. And note here, please, and be careful. Texture maps used by a particular material, by the way, also appear in the lower section of the 3D panel. And when a material is selected, see 3D materials setting. And to edit 3D textures in Photoshop, do either of the following. You should to edit a texture in 2D format, firstly, and the texture opens as a smart object in a separate document window. After that, edit a texture directly on the model, and if necessary, you can temporarily cut away model surfaces to access areas to paint on. And what about edit texture in 2D format? How to edit texture in 2D format? You should to double click the texture in the layers panel firstly, and after that in the material panel you should to select the material that contains the texture, and in the bottom section of the panel you should to click the texture menu icon, and for the texture you want to edit, and choose open texture. And step number 2, you can't use any Photoshop tool, by the way, to paint on or edit the texture. And step number 3, make the window containing the 3D model active to see the updated texture applied to the model. Step number 4, you should to close the texture document and save changes. How to display or hide a texture? How to display or hide a texture? By the way, you can display and hide a texture to help identify what area of the model the texture is applied to. And you should to click the eye icon, by the way, next to the texture layer to hide or display all textures. And you should to click the eye icon next to the top level texture layer. So what about create UV? Create UV overlays. How to create UV overlays? By the way, a diffuse texture file used by multiple materials on a 3D model can group, by the way, several content areas that are applied to different surfaces on the model. And there's a process called UV. Mapping matches coordinates in the 2D texture map with specific coordinates on the 3D model. And UV mapping, by the way, allows the 2D texture to be painted correctly onto the 3D model. And for 3D content created outside Photoshop, UV mapping, by the way, occurs in the program where the content was created. However, Photoshop can create, by the way, UV overlays as guides to help you visualize how 2D texture map matches up with the 3D model surfaces. And by the way, these overlays act as guides when editing a texture, by the way. We have steps here now. Step number 1. Double click a texture firstly in the layers panel to open it for editing. And note here in step number 1, note and be careful, you can't create UV overlays is only enabled when a texture map is open and is active window. Step number 2, you should choose 3D, then choose create UV overlays, then select an overlay option. And we have 3 options here in this step. The first option, wireframe. So what about wireframe? It's meaning that shows edge data of the UV mapping. And what about shaded? Shaded is meaning that shows model areas using a solid rendering mode. And what about the third option, normal map? Normal map is meaning that shows geometric normals translated to RGB values, and where R equal X and G equal Y and B equals Z. And by the way, UV overlays are added as additional layers in the layers panel for the texture file, and you can also show or hide and move or delete a UV overlay. And these overlays appear, by the way, on the model surface when you close and save the texture file. or switch from the texture file to the associated 3D layer, by the way, and the texture file is auto saved, by the way. And note here please in this point, delete or hide UV overlays before performing a final render. So what about re-parameterize a texture map? Re-parameterizes a texture map. By the way, you may open a 3D model whose textures are poorly mapped to the underlying model mesh, and the poor texture mapping can produce, by the way, obvious distortions in the surface appearance of the model, such as unwanted seams or areas of stretching or squeezing of the texture pattern. And the poor texture mapping can also cause unpredictable results when you paint directly on the model. And after that, to check texture, open a texture for editing and then apply a UV overlay to see how the texture aligns with the model surface. And the re-parameterization command reimbuses a texture to the model to correct distortion and create more effective, by the way, surface coverage. We have steps here now. Step number 1. Should open a 3D file with a poorly mapped diffuse texture and then select the 3D layer containing the model. And step number 2, choose 3D, then select re-parameterize. Photoshop notifies you that you are reapplying the texture to the model, then click OK. Step number 3, choose a re-parameterization option, and after that, low distortion keeps the texture pattern more intact, but can create, by the way, more seams on the model surface. And after that, fewer seams minimizes the number of seams that appear on the model. This can produce, by the way, more stretching or bunching of the texture depending on the model. And this image now and this screenshot now explain for you re-parameterized texture using low distortion in the left side and fewer seams in the right side. And step number 4, optional. If the re-parameterization option you choose doesn't create optimal surface coverage, you should choose edit firstly, then select undo and try the other option. And by the way, you can also use the re-parameterize command to improve the default texture mapping that occurs when you create 3D models from 2D layers. And how to create a tile. How to create a tile for a repeating texture. How to create a tile for a repeating texture. By the way, a repeating texture is composed of identical tiles in a grid pattern, and the repeating texture can provide, by the way, more realistic surface coverage of the model, and you can use less storage and improve rendering performance. And you can also convert any 2D file into a tiled painting, and after previewing how multiple tiles interact in the painting, you can also save one tile for use as a repeating texture, by the way. And to set up a mesh for a repeating texture, use the 3D application that created the model. We have steps here now. The first step, you should open a 2D file firstly. Step number 2, select one or more layers in the file, then choose 3D, then select new tiled painting. And the 2D file is converted, by the way, to a 3D plan containing 9 identical tiles of the original content, and the image dimensions remain the same. And step number 3, edit the tile texture with painting tools and filters or other techniques, and the changes you make to one tile automatically appear in the others. Step number 4, save a single tile as a 2D image in the materials section of the 3D panel, then choose open texture from the diffuse menu, and then choose file, then choose save as. Select save as, and specify a name after that, then specify location, then format. And by the way, unless you plan to use the original 9 tile painting independently, close it without saving. Step number 5, to load the tile as a repeating texture, open a 3D model file firstly in the material section of the 3D panel, then choose load texture from the diffuse menu and select the file you saved above.